What's happening, guys? Okay, so let's say you just got through negotiating a sweet deal on that new to you but still used motorcycle. Are there some costs that you maybe did not account for? Well, in this video, we're going to examine some of those costs. And although some of the things that I say you might consider to be common sense, there could be some things I touch upon that you might not have thought about. First things first, guys, make sure you do the proper research on the motorcycle that you're looking to buy, especially the maintenance intervals, those service intervals that the manufacturer would like for you to bring the bike in for them to take care of. Well, it's not just the oil changes or little things like that. I'm talking about the major stuff like valve adjustments. The thing is, guys, a lot of times motorcycle owners will trade their bikes on at about the time these major service intervals are due. If you don't take that into account, you could be looking at a major bill when it comes time to handle those types of services. So make sure you know when not only the regular services are due, but those major services as well. If the bike that you're looking at is coming up on about the same mileage that those major services are due, consider that as part of the negotiation for that bike, or at least as part of the cost of the machine. So next on the list is going to be tires. Guys, just because the tread looks good doesn't mean that the tire's good. In fact, it could be further from the truth. Many motorcycle tire manufacturers do not like to see their tires in use past about 6 years past their manufacture date. The reason for that is the polymers can degrade over time, the performance just isn't there, and it's not there in a way that is in lockstep with the performance that you're going to expect out of that tire. This is a safety thing, so you need to take that into consideration. If the tire is older than, say, 6 or 7 years, or whatever the manufacturer deems is appropriate for that particular tire, you're going to need to put a set of tires on the bike, and we all know tires are not cheap. Next on the list is the brake system. Guys, over time, brake fluid does degrade, and because of that, it can start to corrode certain parts of the brake system. If the bike is more than, say, 4 or 5 years old, consider bleeding the brakes mandatory. And you're going to also want to, at that time, put in new brake pads. Some motorcycle manufacturers also recommend swapping out brake lines if they're rubber and other rubber components that are in the braking system. Again, that falls in line with just making sure that you've gone over those service intervals before you buy the bike. Next, the cooling system. Guys, motorcycles are typically not the primary mode of transportation. And because of that, well, they sit around a long time. If the bike is water cooled, then that could create an issue. Stagnant coolant will begin to corrode components more quickly. So in knowing that, if again, the bike is over, say, 4 or 5 years old, a complete fluid flush is in order. Don't take this for granted. Just because the bike doesn't overheat doesn't mean everything is good. This is a service that you're going to need to perform on the bike to keep it working properly. Next on the list, well, we're finally to the oil. Most guys will say, well, I'm going to need an oil change. I'll take care of that myself. That's fine, but in some cases, you may look at the oil and see that it looks perfectly fine. It's a beautiful shade of amber. What could possibly be wrong? Well, again, motorcycles sit for extended periods of time, and, well, condensation can get into the crankcase and contaminate the oil. This is a situation where at least once a year, you've got to be swapping oil. In fact, I would consider an oil change to be the very first thing that you do to the bike, because you need fresh oil in the thing before you start spinning that thing up to really high RPM and having fun with it. Oil change does need to be first, but it's not the only change, as we've already examined. But what about other components of the motorcycle, like fuel system, for example? Significantly older motorcycles, if the classics are what you're into, weren't designed to run on modern fuels with ethanol. Consider swapping out fuel lines, and you may even need to replace a fuel pump while you're at it. But again, that's going to depend on the age of the bike and how well it was maintained coming into this purchase. Another area to look at, driveline components, sprockets, chains, or drive belts all need to be examined and make sure that they are in fine working order. You see a chain that's outside of its range of adjustment, or sprockets that are starting to look rounded off, you'll know that you'll need to replace that entire assembly of both sprockets and a chain at the same time, not a small expense. And also, last but not least, bearings. This is an area where a lot of guys do tend to forget that you have bearings in the hubs of these bikes. They can get washed out. They do need to be lubricated on occasion. And just consider that as part of your service when you do buy the bike. So, with all of that, I could have forgotten something, but I think I touched on all the major parts. If you're looking to buy a used bike, they can be a very rewarding experience and a great way to get into a bike that normally you wouldn't be able to get into. But please make sure that you take into consideration all of those hidden costs and attack all of those maintenance items first. Then you can get out there and have a blast on that bike just as though you bought it brand new. And with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Post up your comments. Let me know if I forgot anything. We'll catch y'all in the next one. Adios.